Becca, how you going?
Hey Jack, good to see you again.
So good to see you. Always love catching up with you and yeah, going down the absolute deepest of rabbit holes that you send me on. And today I think we've got a pretty hectic one actually. I just thought I'd briefly kind of introduce, because it's been a little while since we've spoken on air or anything. We kind of came to know each other or communicate back in the Josiah Mizukami days when I interviewed this deranged, probably schizophrenic pedophile who was kind of trying to start a cult. You reached out to me. You were kind of behind the scenes collecting all this different information on him. Since all that, since that interview, since all the things that you've done behind the scenes, since other people like Alex Rosen, this pedophile hunter, he is now in jail. He got done from a sting operation.
Wait.
Vigilantes,
What? Who
uh,
who's in jail?
Josiah. Sorry, no,
Oh shit, I
he's
thought you
in
were talking about Alex. I was like, what did I miss? Holy
Oh
crap.
no, no,
Okay,
no.
you're good.
No, he's not in
Yeah,
jail. Sorry. He's in I think a
he's in a mental
mental
institution.
health,
Yeah.
yeah, mental institution for the
Last
criminally
I
insane.
checked, they're not going to let him go anytime soon.
No.
Yeah.
Quite
It's
rightly.
really funny. I think we talked about it a little bit, but like so I dug around and it took me a while to find the court documents on it. But on all the court documents, it's basically just him going to the court and saying, I deserve to be released. I'm being held prisoner. And they're like, okay, thank you for your comments. And then they talk about like how he's refusing his treatment, refusing to take any medications and all that. And then they'll write down like, um, defendant had multiple other comments to the court, and then all of it's just noted. They did. You can tell that he just went on this crazed, rambling, like incoherent diatribe, and the court just like, "Thank you,
Yeah.
Mr.
Yeah.
Mizukami. We'll see you next time. All right, cool. All right, get out of here. Okay, we get it. You're the Messiah. All right, great."
Yeah. I went back and listened or watched it again, and man, the first half of it, it's hard to get through. He is just rambling absolute nonsense. So thank God for the edit that you put out where it just cuts straight to the good bits, because it's like, oh man, it's mind-numbing. But
Yeah.
anyway, I was wondering whether you could just kind of give a little intro, just a brief summary of kind of what you do, the kind of research or I guess almost private detective kind of work that you do, what you kind of focus on and where it's led you.
Yeah, so I obviously I research a lot of really crazy rabbit holes. I guess it like where do I start? I mean, I guess most of my stuff started with this child advocacy stuff, trying to protect kids online. And I think a lot of it started there. And then just morphed over time. And there were, a couple of other like side shoots to this. But I think that, the other side shoot was looking into like mass shootings, which was also, you know, ended up being kind of crazy.
Yeah.
And then those two things ended up kind of converging. And I started to realize that, all these weird rabbit holes that I go down, they all seem to eventually connect in some way. It was very strange to kind of notice that stuff. But I would, if I had to take it through, like I've often joked that like this arc in my life has seasons. Like this is the season one finale, right? This is the season two mid-season finale. Like there's like different villains and different like arcs that we've been on. But the path basically went from looking into big tech and social media, like child safety issues, right? Child safety concerns in big tech and social media, and how they're basically complicit and just not doing anything to keep our kids safe. And then from there, we kind of went more towards the mass shooting stuff. And then we took a little sidetrack into the, I guess, spookier side of LARPs and like behind the curtain type of stuff, right? On accident. I think you and I saw behind the curtain a bit, and we're kind of, it was a confusing and stressful time for everybody, right?
Mm.
Um, and then from there, I kind of kept along those same lines, looking into the incel forum. Um, and that's when things just started to escalate. And I started looking into this satanic group, the Order of Nine Angles, who seem to be behind a lot of the stuff that I've been looking into. And now here it has come around full circle again with this whole 764 cult thing, which is another, online child predator cult. So um, lots of stuff to talk about if, you can just pick and choose, I guess, the most
Yeah,
interesting parts, but it's
totally.
definitely been a wild ride.
So one thing before we get right into it, one thing I do kind of want to say about you is, I mean, some of the things that you've covered were things that I would probably maybe a year or two ago, have just been like, yeah, bullshit. Conspiracy narratives gone awry. But the difference with you is every single time that I've looked where you've pointed me, it's proven to be true. You come with receipts. You post the links with this new one, 764. You posted the FBI warning to everyone. These are things that the authorities take seriously. There are satanic pedophile cults that wreak havoc. Um, whether it goes as far as being like Hillary Clinton and all that's involved, probably not. Well, as far as I know, but unless you have any evidence to show otherwise. But nonetheless, you come with receipts. You're very, very thorough. I got to see that firsthand when going down the Josiah Mizukami rabbit hole with you, and since and other things. But you've made me reconsider a lot of things that I didn't particularly, maybe for a period was not open to. Maybe the origins of QAnon would be one that we could touch on at some point, or these satanic pedophile cults, another one. But I think we'll probably let's get into the 764 cult, the Kyle Spitz situation, because this has really popped off in the last couple of weeks. You have really uncovered a lot of this stuff and I was really looking that not a whole lot of media outlets are covering. They covered the initial bit,
Yeah,
but they have not covered where
crazy.
it's gone at all. And it's insane. And it's things get pretty hairy for you, actually. So maybe we could start with, I mean, where did it start? Do we start with the video, or
Yeah.
where did it all start?
Well, yeah, no, I can go back just a little bit further, I think, to where I started. So, I had been like, again, I'd been kind of studying some of these online extremist groups, some of these real extreme online forums, gore websites, in the incel forum, and these places where we're starting to see like these mass shooters. Like when you look back at their social media footprint or their online footprint, a lot of them were in these places, right? And so that's where we were kind of looking around and, looking for, the people who are basically grooming them to do this stuff. And I know that's another one of those things that sounds just insane, but no, really, it's even mentioned in the news about them, right? They'll even talk about how, yeah, they were in a Discord chat room with these people. I'm like, who are these people though? I think we deserve to like actually get a good look at this. And I'm not alleging that every single mass shooter is groomed by like, I don't know who it is, right? But I have seen them being groomed in certain cases by individuals that I think is in the public's best interest to know who these people are and investigate that a little bit more deeply, right? So
Mm.
that's what I was kind of in there doing. And that's when I discovered that there was a researcher, a very highly esteemed researcher in extremism, who had worked for military intelligence, and her name was Jade Parker, and she had actually you know tried to blow the whistle on a lot of this stuff, and she particularly pointed a finger at the satanic terror organization Order of Nine Angles, which again, it's not a conspiracy. This is it's been declared a terrorist organization in basically every country. Like, this is a known group, right?
How
This
big
isn't
is this
like,
group?
well, we don't know because a lot of people, there's a lot of obfuscation around it. And there's not a whole lot, like they're very secret and veiled, secretive. So like, it's hard to kind of get a read on how many there might be. But I actually, like, I started out thinking that it was going to be like a much wider movement, like a much bigger thing. And now I think that it's actually quite small.
Mm.
And I think that because, these people are engaging with me online on Twitter all the time, right? And I think that a lot of them I think a lot of the accounts engaging with me are the founder of the organization, a man named David Myatt, who was an old school kind of Operation Gladio Column 88 guy in the UK back, several decades ago. And he's now the founder of this movement. And now he's like an old man. He's like, got to be almost 80. And he just spends all of his time on Twitter responding to mentions of his own name. So you can summon him just by saying his name, and then poof, all these accounts start talking to you about why you're wrong about Order of Nine Angles. And like, you don't know what you're talking about. Actually, they're trying to kind of like guide narratives around themselves. Very obvious. So a lot of weird stuff that goes on. And so I don't, to answer your question, I don't know how big it is. I don't know. In fact, today, and we could talk about this later if you want, but like literally right before I started this podcast, that like the Church of Satan official Twitter page jumps on my thread about the 764 stuff and start arguing with random people about Satanism, which like, I'm over here, like, I don't care, guys. Like, I don't care. I don't care about your Satanism. Like, that's not something that I'm like satanic panic. It's evil. They're worshiping devils and killing kids. Like, no, I think that most of them were just edgy, like anti-religious types, right? Like, I mean, we're the same age, right? So we grew up in the same age in high school with like the goth kids and death metal, right? And I don't think it's that unusual that people would turn that into their religion. And I think that's how most Satanists are. But the Church of Satan was on my Twitter earlier today, and they just came out, like I asked them straight up about Order of Nine Angles, and the official Church of Satan website basically responded and said, like, that's not even real. It's just a bunch of it's just a fed op. It's just a honey trap. And so I started pushing them, like, is this the Church of Satan's official position? Like, this seems like it's a big deal that they just said that, right?
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of speculation that the whole thing is just a fed op, and which is problematic because, and this is something I just can't wrap my head around, because what happened is that this 764 group has been called an offshoot of the O9A, meaning that it kind of spawned off of the O9A ideology and then twisted into its own kind of, thing. And so while we were in all of these, we've been in a lot of weird Discord servers, a lot of places that, really mentally disturbed people hang out, right? Obviously, because we're looking for this kind of stuff, right? And we started to see a rise in like these Discord servers that had a lot of really extreme gore type of content, animal torture, self-harm, people cutting themselves, real violent, nasty stuff. And those same groups were associated with child pornography as well. And so we didn't know what we were looking at, because the FBI didn't come out and publicly like name this group until September, I think, of last year. And this was after there was a big arrest in New York of a guy named Angel Almeida. The FBI released a bulletin saying, like, there are these groups. They are Satanists and they're pedophiles. And they're not just that, but they're like an extortion network. So they basically groom kids to groom other kids to do all of these horrible things. And they do it by, basically extorting them, blackmailing them, getting them to do something, and then hanging that over their head to get them to hurt other people and grow the network. And it's just really like virulent, parasitic thing that has just like it's like gone from just like a very small thing to like a very broad kind of pervasive issue. And there's a lot of branches that call themselves various things, but I just call it 764 for ease of reference. They're making their own little splinters. And, it's true what Vice came out and wrote an article about recently, saying that, a lot of them is kids hurting kids. And that's true. But I took a little bit of a problem with Vice saying that, because at the top of this is an adult, right? Vice was making it seem like, oh, these are kids hurting kids. And like, a lot of them are kids. And, doing really, some of them are older kids, like 17, 18, which is like legally probably an adult, right? But yeah, we could look at them as a kid, but they're still an adult somewhere along the line who's grooming these kids to do it. And Vice's article didn't hit the spot for me there, because it seemed like it was trying to kind of get away from that. It's trying to paint this as like all just a bunch of edgy kids, but I disagree. So that's what the 764 stuff is.
Do you have
really a satanic pedophile cult.
Yeah. Do you have any ideas or inklings as to what the motives of these or organizations or cults from the top down? Is it just do they actually believe in Satan? Are they just trying to do like evil things for the sake of it? Is it a way of getting power? Is it a way of expanding? Or is it some kind of branch of accelerationism where they're just trying to wreak havoc to um, from the inside out to watch society crumble a bit? Is it like where's the anger coming from? Where's the motive coming from? Do you have any thoughts?
I My idea and my thoughts align with that of Jade Parker, who's the researcher that I just mentioned, in that I believe it's accelerationist groups.
Hmm.
I don't believe that they're actually worshiping Satan. I think that that's just an aesthetic that they adopted for a
Right.
variety of reasons. And I've explained this multiple times, but it's really hard to, like, every tweet I make about it, it's hard to explain that behind every tweet I make, because
Hmm.
some of really what we need to do right now is we need to get these guys arrested. Like, these guys who are doing these things to kids, they need to go away. And they're
Hmm.
they're really dumb, right? They're all over the place threatening my kid, threatening me online. And they're out there just being really, like, open and bold about it all. And so we need to catch these guys. So it doesn't make sense for every single tweet I make about them for me to go into the backstory about accelerationism and where it originated. That's a bit high in scope, and that for that reason I've got a lot of pushback from people, like, in all my threads, like, well, I'm a Satanist and I'm okay. And it's like, all right, well, you got to understand that, like, Satanism has always been what I call a poison dagger, meaning that if you like, Satanism is inherently vilified everywhere, right? And so if you can connect and also discredit it, like satanic panic kind of stuff. So if you
Right.
can associate a group with Satanism, you kind of have a veil there, like a cover, right? Because people are less likely to even believe you when you're talking about it. They think you sound crazy. And it's very discrediting to a lot of people. But on the flip side, to the people who believe in that kind of, who like ascribe to that kind of satanic panic stuff, it's very scary. So it has kind of a dual purpose, right?
Right.
Half the people are freaking out, and the other half are saying you're crazy, which is
Yeah,
exactly what accelerationists would want.
it does kind of play into that, that funny culture war kind of thing as well, where and the rise of conspiracism, where as soon as you hear about Satanism, you can write it off as like, oh, the evangelical people, like evangelical Christians blowing things up or something. I mean, that's probably where my mind went a while ago. But again, thanks to you bringing receipts, pointing, thorough research, definitely made me yeah, reconsider all that, obviously. But also just a quick little tangent, and we can get into it more later, but are you able to just to quickly outline what accelerationism is for people who might not know?
Sure. Yeah. So, um, and my definition here is going to differ from, like, what you'll find online if you research it, and there's a reason for that, and we can talk about it later, right? But so I met this woman, Jade Parker. I actually never met her, but, like, I met a friend of hers who ended up basically telling me, "Hey, my friend and you have the same. You guys have the same idea. You're seeing these same things, happening, and you're basically, like, on the same track. Whereas everybody else in the, like, terrorism community, counterterrorism community, they're kind of on a different track, right?" And so what I was seeing and what Jade was seeing were that there seemed to be these people who were grooming people to be domestic terrorists, to commit mass shootings, to, in some cases, not even just that, but just to hurt and murder and to kill themselves and to do awful things, groom kids, right? And so the whole idea is basically of accelerationism is basically, furthering the division that's inherent to a political system. So in the U.S., that's the political right and left wing, right? And so you're doing things, kind of a sinister type of terrorism, overt terrorism, right? Or covert terrorism, kind of like behind the scenes, controlling it in such a way that those two divisions will fight with each other, and that friction, they believe, will accelerate the collapse of society, or accelerate basically the West collapsing, the West falling. That's what they want. This is anti-West ultimately, regardless of, and it's decentralized. It's not like a well-funded, organized terror organization like ISIS was or is. This is a much more broad, decentralized movement, and there's a variety of people that are kind of behind the scenes, foreign and domestic, who are basically just trying to create chaos in society so that they can hasten the collapse of the West. That is the bottom line. Now, the difference between what I believe, which is that, and what the mainstream kind of counterterrorism narrative is that they have basically taken this concept of accelerationism and said, this is a concept that white supremacists use. This is a concept that these, far right extremists use. And I don't think that's accurate. I think that, like Jade, what I have seen is that there are these spooky actors that go into these chat rooms, or even probably real rallies. Like there's been some at the Charlottesville rally at January 6th. They go there with a specific motive and goal in mind to use these more extreme movements or extreme subsets of society, like the white supremacists or the incels, right? And strategically push those groups to commit terror attacks or acts of domestic terrorism, so that it seems like the incels are doing it, or it seems like white supremacists are doing it. It seems like transgender people are doing it, right? But in reality, what you have are these people behind the scenes who realize what makes us angry. Well, what is everyone mad about right now? Transgender stuff. Did you notice that the mass shootings like shifted suddenly from being more white supremacy motivated, and now all of a sudden all you're seeing is about how everybody's trans, or there's a gender fluid aspect to it. And it's curious to see how the tides change there, right? If white supremacy is still such a big deal, like we sure haven't really been seeing them do much anymore. And
Yeah.
in our
Yep.
opinion, it's really these people behind the scenes who are kind of manipulating these narratives and, strategically, kind of, I guess, like provoking domestic terror attacks in certain ways so that it maximizes the amount of fighting we do over it.
There must be an underlying philosophy behind it, or if they're advocating to try and accelerate the collapse of Western society, and it would, I guess it's kind of in vein of, once that's collapsed and democracy is over, or whatever, I assume that there's some kind of ideology that they want to replace that with, maybe whether it's anarchism, or do you
This is kind of a funny point that also Jade and I also kind of came to the same conclusion, or we got to this point where we go, okay, so you want society to collapse, and these guys, and like I've got them, I've talked to these people, one-to-one. Okay, so society collapses, now what? Well, step 3, profit, right? It's like, so their step 3 is this fascist takeover. Well, then we take over with the fascist regime. I'm like, which one? Well, it's, if you're a nationalist socialist, then it's a national socialist. We're going to take over. But if you're an anarch, like eco-fascist, well, eco-fascists are going to take over. And you're like, so then I started asking them, well, like, what are we looking at here after the collapse? Is this going to be like a Mad Max Thunderdome type of situation where all of these various fascist groups fight to be the one that takes over America? Like, how do you see that panning out? Right. And they can't really answer because they haven't really thought it through, it doesn't seem like, which really makes me wonder if that's more of something that these guys are being groomed to believe, when in reality, the goal is just to collapse the West. And it's not because they want to take over America with the fascist regime so much as that they know that once the U.S. is destabilized and the U.S. collapses, then the rest of the West collapses. And they have geopolitical motives, which would point towards a more, like a foreign actors. So, the thing is, we just don't know the answers to this. It's all just kind of theory based on what we've seen and what we've, encountered out there and how they operate.
So do you think these accelerationist groups, you think groups like the Order of Nine, what is it again? Sorry,
Order of Nine Angles.
And
Yeah.
764, they are at least these groups would be the finger you'd point towards actual accelerationist groups in practice? Or do you think, is it all just layers and layers and layers and goes higher and higher? And
there's a lot of layers. Yeah. But the idea though, which is Jade had really focused in on this O9A stuff, and I don't know if she's right about it or not, because I can see I can make criticisms, or like if I knew where she was, I could talk to her. I would ask her a lot of questions about what she believed here. However, the way the O9A works is by doing what they call insight roles. And so basically, the insight role is they go and infiltrate another group that's not related to O9A, like National Socialists or incels, right? And they pose as one of them, and they get real close to everybody. They build rapport and they learn all about the ideology here so that they can figure out ways to, basically, steer certain groups of people towards their goal, towards enacting their goals. So they're basically just trying to infiltrate groups and manipulate the narratives within those groups. And so, yeah, it's I think that there's a lot of layers, right? Because who's at the top there? Like, how do we know O9A isn't just another layer? There's people above it, right? Just using that spooky satanic aesthetic to kind of manipulate people. So yeah, for
And
sure. I do.
that's where it does kind of get into that conspiracy narrative where it's like, well, how high does it go? Does it go all the
But
way to
it's
the
not a
top?
conspiracy to ask, though,
Right.
right?
Well,
Because
especially
somebody's
if you're
driving it,
finding
you know?
actual cases, that's the
Yeah,
interesting bit. It's like, no, there's someone to actually point at here. There's
right.
evidence for this. It's not just evil elites that worship Satan. That's just like, well, is there any evidence for that? And, I mean, that's kind of
Right.
where I think most people
Well,
should check out of that stuff. So, well, give us some evidence, but you aren't.
yeah. Well, that's the other thing is like with the Jade Parker saga, right? Is that she was this esteemed counterterrorism analyst, right? She'd worked for JSOC. She had a big role in the collapse of ISIS, right? So this woman has really engaged a lot of like sophisticated counterterrorism cyber ops. So she was a pretty reputable person. And when she's the person who noticed accelerationism, named accelerationism, like according to her, she's the one who laid the foundation for all of it, right? But when she started to try to talk to her colleagues, this is all according to her, she says that they stole her work and then basically gaslit her and went on a coordinated harassment campaign against her and ousted her from her field. It basically just made her the pariah. Nobody listened to her. She's crazy, which what does that sound like, right? That's a huge red flag for people like you and I who've seen that happen plenty of times. It's very suspicious when somebody suddenly starts getting called crazy by a large group of people. It kind of makes you like sit back and go, what's actually going on here, right? Well, in her opinion, what they had done was they had taken her work and they had completely reframed it. So now instead of being, about like who's running this, who's the actual puppet master pulling the strings, right? Is it Alexander Dugin? Is it like one of these foreign actors? Is it ISIS, right? And they basically said no, this lady's crazy. This is just a concept made up by white supremacists that they use to groom people. It's all white supremacists and stuff. And so it was really sneaky because we're like, that doesn't seem right because they're in all of these different groups. And white supremacists is only just one of the groups that's showing this trend. And they also kind of want you to feel like it's this truly just a decentralized movement that's just basically like a virus that just took over and keeps like spreading, right? But I have my doubts about that. I think that there are people who are kind of pulling the strings higher up, but they don't want you to even ask those questions, which is why when a mass shooting happens, they don't want you to know that this guy was in a Discord chat room with like some spooky individual who'd been giving them all of his, this advice on what guns to buy. Like, who was that person? Why do they not want us to ask who that person was? I think that's really important, right? Because if you have this mentally ill person and you have somebody who's grooming them and convincing them to go commit this act, then in my mind, that person's the terrorist. The other person was just like a patsy or, like a kid that you strapped a bomb vest to, right? Because a lot of these people are kids or they're autistic or they're, a lot of these people just aren't, they're very vulnerable, impressionable types of people, mentally ill people. And so you really got to wonder, in these situations, is there somebody who was in their ear kind of giving them instructions? That's something really important for us to know. It's not conspiratorial to ask those questions. We should have full transparency to these kinds of things so we don't have to ask.
Yeah. And on that school shooter kind of thing that you were just talking about, I'd advise everyone to check out the little documentary that you made, documentary series about Bobby Cremo, who was the Highland Park shooter.
Oh, I don't have that up right now, but
Oh,
like
okay,
I'm
sure.
I'm retooling it. But you know what?
What a rabbit
I,
hole.
yeah, if
Far
you go,
out.
well, oh, we could talk about that at another time because
Yeah.
it's just gotten even
Mm,
crazier. I had to pull myself down basically because of the trial coming up and there's too much
right.
spooky stuff going on. But too many weird people just started to people started to pop up, characters started to pop up, and it was very strange. I was like, I don't like this. I'm gonna bow
Mm,
out for a bit.
mm.
Um, but as far as what I'm talking about right now, there's a really great video on my Rumble page that does touch on this the Bobby Primo stuff and ties all of this stuff in a way that I think is pretty easy to understand. And it's
Mm.
only about 20 minutes long, so it's a lot shorter than me rambling right now.
Yep.
Um,
Another, like, just to kind of bring it so it's more understandable or digestible for people listening, I think like a good example of this kind of accelerationism, which might be framed differently, would be, I think there's a lot of talk for a while, especially around the, US election and stuff, about Russian bot farms and things that would kind of infiltrate these Facebook pages, and they would help organize, like a pro or like an anti-abortion rally right next to a pro-abortion rally or something, and the people from foreign countries are assisting in trying to create havoc in the US, within groups of people with very, very charged opinions about certain topics. I mean, abortion, I just picked that out of the hat. There's lots of different examples. And when you can actually point to something like a Russian bot farm or something, you'd be like, right, okay, that kind of makes a bit of sense. But then when it's coming from a domestic group, especially when you throw some occultism in there as well, and weird kind of ideas of, satanic worship or whatever, I think that's where people often think it's a bit far-fetched, but it's showing to not be, with this whole
right.
764 and order of nine angles stuff that
Yeah.
you've kind of brought to light.
And a lot of it's I mean, this is psychological warfare. That's what this is, right? This is we're in a world war without even realizing it. Narratives are being controlled, manipulated. Politics are being manipulated by foreign governments and bot farms, like right under our noses. And a lot of times we don't even realize it, right? We don't
Hmm.
even realize that we're dealing with a Russian bot farm when we're, but that stuff is real, and it's a way to influence American politics, and it's very subversive and sinister. So there's a lot of stuff I think that's happening that could be attributed to just the modern day psychological warfare.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yes, psyops are a thing. um,
Yeah.
a lot of people call things psyops when they might not be, but they literally are. I think turning my mind back, I've kind of gone through a few little arcs of being, I was right down the rabbit hole of conspiracism when I was in my early 20s. Then I completely rejected it because I think I met a lot of people that were just pushing them, and I'm just like, you don't know what you're talking about. And a lot of it is baseless, but also, yeah, I don't know. I think that's why I keep covering them, because it's interesting finding where does the line, where is it? Where does the truth lie? Is it somewhere in the middle? Is most of these things that you might call conspiracy theories, there is always a grain of truth. Sometimes that grain is much more than a grain. Sometimes it's completely exaggerated, which discredits the entire premise that it's on. Whether
Right.
that's on
And we saw
purpose
that with
could.
like QAnon, right? Like
Hmm.
an elaborate LARP to basically take people who are already kind of going down a conspiratorial path, right? That might be close to some truth. If they were to keep going down that path, they might actually find what they're looking for. But then they get sidetracked onto these, like, into this rabbit hole, which is this entirely fabricated reality that they're basically, it's a giant coordinated game that somebody has like arranged, and all of it's fake, but all of these people are just playing along thinking it's real. They're trapped there. That you can control those people very easily because they're no longer seeking the truth. You're showing them where the truth is, and you're leading them in a different direction. So yeah, I mean, something like QAnon's a perfect example of something like that. And that
Yeah.
had a double purpose to discredit stuff like we're talking about now too, right? People immediately like close their ears when they hear about pedophile rings. They think it's a
Right.
QAnon thing.
Right. Yep. Totally. I mean, I could easily. I haven't actually kind of really talked that much about the QAnon rabbit hole that you kind of sent me down, which we could. I mean, we could veer off down that rabbit
Sorry about
hole.
that.
No, 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 because I
That
want
was
to
so
talk.
bad.
I want to talk because after talking to you and going down a bit of a rabbit hole on certain characters, which we could name or not name, up to you, involving things like Cicada, whatever, which was in the QAnon documentary on HBO, Q Into the Storm.
Yeah, sure.
They covered Cicada. What was it called? Cicada 221, or I can't remember the number. It was a number after Cicada.
3301.
33. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, that was basically a, what do they call them? Alternate reality games.
Alternate reality game. Yeah.
And it's very, very sophisticated, where they seem to kind of um, put out puzzles on the internet, very sophisticated puzzles. Like, I think it started with an image, and it's just, where's the hidden message in this? And it took, very, very few people were able to actually take that image, put it through some weird data, pulling apart the data that's actually in the image, and then they were actually able to find a hidden message. And then that hidden message was, only picked up by, say, 100 people, and then those 100 people get the next instruction. And this game went on, and it's real, and it's really fascinating, and it kind of kept going, and it went all around the world. And little breadcrumbs were left everywhere. There was a lot of suspicion that it may have been a recruitment for an intelligence thing. There was there was a lot of different suspicions, and then it just kind of
I
went
have my own
silent.
suspicions that it was basically the output of a think tank that was trying to do some intelligence gathering on how good people, how strong are the collective people on the internet when they put their minds and their wits together. Because if you look at these games like Cicada 3301, there's lots of different there's the cryptography aspect, there's like this real world aspect, and there's all these different skills that someone might need in like the military intelligence, for example. And you crowdsource it so that you have all these people working together to solve the puzzles. They wanted to see like how good the collective was at solving these things. And I think that it was just a big a social experiment. And then and the reason I think that is because the output and what like the consequence of that was that in Cicada 3301, but in the related ARGs that came out around that time, people generally knew that they were playing a game, right? They knew that this wasn't like they weren't on a secret mission from a spy to that it was actually a game. But what ended up happening was that this concept was weaponized. So QAnon is a huge example of that. But also in a smaller scale, there's all kinds of what we call unmarked trailheads that are just like traps that are planted all over the internet, where you could just stumble upon one of these things and end up in a cult, right? Or in a very dangerous group that you didn't even realize being used for a political purpose and not even realize it. So the concept was taken, in my opinion, weaponized by the same people who created Cicada 3301 in a really sinister way. And it's worth pointing out that those people are also Satanists in the most literal sense. Like, these people were students of Michael Aquino. And so then you go back full circle, right? You start to see these occult and Satanist elements everywhere. And you realize that some of the people who are enacting these like really large, elaborate psychological warfare initiatives are Satanists.
Yeah. So the thing with the link with QAnon, which did start to make me start to question and diverge from a lot of the Q researchers that I have spoken to and had on this podcast. I think the general conclusion, and I think it was the conclusion on the Q Into the Storm documentary, was that it was one big LARP that kind of got out of hand. And, people with political ideologies were pulling the strings, but they were just kind of these nerds like Jim Watkins and Ron Watkins and blah, 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 which we kind of covered. And trolls, maybe accelerationists themselves, but kind of just lone operators with ideology. But where it kind of goes, there's this guy, I think, what's his name, Stewanon or whatever, and he started talking about all this stuff, and he's largely just discredited as a bit of a goose in that kind of QAnon research space, and a know-it-all, and it's seen as and framed as conspiracism on the other side. I think that's why they call it Blueanon, maybe. where it's not the right-wing conspiracy theories, it's the kind of left-wing conspiracy theories, explaining away that conspiracy, that it is one big psyop. But you know, with Cicada 3301, we have documented case of that happening, that existing. We know who is kind of behind it.
Yeah, and
And
it's the same person behind Q.
right,
Also,
so
the
then
creator of Q was the person who created Cicada 3301.
right. So even
Yeah.
even in the documentary, they kind of frame the whole QAnon thing as one big game, which is exactly what Cicada 3301 is. It might just be a bit more of a dumbed down game, much less intellectually focused and much more appealing to the general masses. But you know, same thing, breadcrumbs, enough for you to feel like you're a bit of a researcher at home. And
Right.
I
Because it's
think
an
especially,
archetype, right? They're
mm,
preying on people's tendencies to want to socially connect via an archetype. The investigator, the inquisitive one, right? The mother, oh my gosh, save the children. You know, the person who's like, I'm going to protect people. I'm going to go, you know, vigilante, and you know, so they're preying on these types of people, and their deepest, you know, like I guess persona, right? Like
mm,
I would probably be more of the maternal category, wanting to protect people, wanting to help kids, right? It's very
mhm,
strong, very, very strong behavioral science behind that.
yep,
And that was exploited. And those people were, they were exploited and used. And in my opinion, probably seriously harmed a lot of people,
yeah,
you know, psychologically. So
yeah,
pretty
and
fucked up. I think that I don't know why we haven't investigated this and pressed charges on the people who did it. I think that it's suspicious that we
yeah.
have not openly addressed this because, you
Sure, it just
know,
went
I mean,
away,
it was
right?
basically the biggest cult ever, the biggest cult in history.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and just went away. Totally, totally. So with that whole alternative narrative, I just don't think it's that implausible, particularly when we have examples and the same characters linked with documented cases of that kind of intellectual manipulation with people. I don't think it's unplausible, but I did find when speaking to many QAnon researchers that they were a bit dismissive of that, and when I would bring up the names, Thomas Schoenberger, I'll say it, he people would always shy away from it. They would say, "Oh yeah, should kind of shut it down," and yeah, kind of got the idea that they just didn't want to give him any limelight, I guess. But I don't know. It seems like a weak cop out. You know, I don't really want to give him any
Yeah.
attention. He's a bad dude. I just don't, I don't really want to give him any attention. It's just like, yeah, but what, it's
Probably
not
threatened them behind the scenes, like you threatened me.
sure,
I
but
mean,
shouldn't that
it
be an
certainly
indicator? Yeah,
made me
so
not want to talk about it anymore. Like, I mean, because it wasn't, you know, I'm getting threats right now from these 764 guys, but like physically, I can protect myself, right?
mm,
And these guys are making physical threats, but you know, and I'm not gonna get too far into it, but these guys are making a lot spookier threats to you. You know, this is the kind of stuff that makes you go, could my life actually be in danger by very
mm,
powerful people? And that's the kind of, you know, like I'm not worried about these criminal thugs from 764 trying to come to my house. Like most of these kids are just in their fucking mom's basements, you know, looking like little losers.
mm,
You're not going to do that, right? So I don't feel like that's as credible of a threat. But like, then you go, well, actually, like your conspiracy brain starts reading. You're like, no, like people do get killed for getting too
yeah,
close to some of this stuff. And that's the kind of situation where I think a lot of people go, I'm going to look for a different explanation, right? But I've seen
mm.
some QAnon researchers go way the hell off. Like the one of them was trying to claim that it was like connected to like Thomas Jefferson, or I don't know. It was like some weird, like it goes all the way back to Ben Franklin. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like,
I know
I
it's
don't know
hard.
how they could miss the plot so badly, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's I don't know, it's so much information, it is easy to tap out or just be like, I don't know. But yeah, I thought based on that rabbit hole that when we were talking to, and just the little, I don't go anywhere near as deep as you, but just kind of looking into the certain characters, I was like, this is pretty spooky. This is pretty creepy, and there's a track record here, and there are other people out there that have kind of spoken about it. Some really really small podcasts with that I was looking into of people kind of claiming, yep, as soon as they started talking about it, they started getting threatened. But anyway, it's interesting. I mean, yeah, That could easily be an example of accelerationists ideologies in practice. Again, I
Absolutely.
don't know if that's true or not. I don't think it's implausible at all. But
No,
and
and you start to see the same common themes behind a lot of this other stuff, like alternate reality games that are being used, to get to trap people and get people to react to behave a certain way. It's behavioral control is
mm,
what they're using it for, right? And you see again a lot of the occultist elements being used to kind of guide narratives and stuff like that. And so like no, it really does. There are a lot of overlaps. There are a lot of times where I see something and go, ooh, that kind of gave me deja vu back to this other arc we were on that time with
mm,
Schoenberger and the big LARPs that they were putting on. They're still doing that, by the way. They've not stopped. They're still trapping people in weird LARPs. And I've since met a lot of other people who've kind of been in the same boat as me, and we always meet each other and we're like, we talk for like 3 hours on the phone, like it's like this huge session where we're like realizing that we're not alone. It sounds crazy to most people if you were just explain it, but like no, there's a lot of people who've seen this and been trapped in it. And it's fascinating too, right? It's
yeah,
really fascinating. Like it really makes you sit and just kind of wonder like, man, what is going on in our world, right?
sure,
um
sure.
but I tried not to look into that one too much just because I was like, I don't know how close I'm getting to like, Hillary Clinton or whatever, let's be real. How close am I to Epstein right now? It feels like I'm too close.
I mean,
One
I've seen
step away.
another
Not gonna open
example.
that door.
Yeah, yeah. I kind of got there too, and I didn't go anywhere near as deep as you, which I guess is same with the whole subject of looking at these with Josiah Mizukami, and he's this weird. There was all sorts of. I mean, I don't think we ever really talked about it, but on the podcast, but there was a lot of again weird groups that Josiah was in that had underlining philosophies, and Josiah was a bit of a branch away from it. It was weird. We
You're
didn't
getting
it
close again to the you're about to go full circle though. I'm
Yeah,
warning you.
but that's yeah,
Because
exactly. So
like go ahead.
yeah, there were groups and characters that you did an excellent job of um, looking at or penetrating or highlighting. And the more I kind of looked at some characters, and it gets really weird. There gets
Yeah.
some really weird core groups with strange
Culty type of
esoteric
people, right?
values. And
Yeah.
it wasn't necessarily that they were like a pedophile cult, but they were a weird cult
No,
that
no.
Josiah branched off and took a
Yeah.
lot of his ideas that then he tried to regurgitate
Mm.
into his thing called, what was this stupid cult called?
Oh,
What was it called
oh
again?
my God. Oh my God. I don't even remember. I do remember,
Ah,
but it's like
God,
right
the
on the tip of my
websites
tongue.
and
But
everything.
yeah,
Yeah, same. But yeah, so I mean, he kind of did that, and obviously he was a pedophile and
yeah.
mixed
And we've
pedophilia into that
talked
because he's
about that
God.
too.
Um,
Exactly. We talked about that kind of God complex and how, like,
yeah.
maybe him getting into this cult, like, kind of really just exacerbated his schizophrenia.
Hmm.
And then, the pedophile stuff seemed to me like that was coming from like maybe deep down he'd always kind of had those urges, and now he's trying to justify it using this God complex. So to me, the
Right.
psychology there was very fascinating. But the group that was like surrounding him was definitely also part of this. And I found out what that ideology was, by the way. I found out where it came from.
Mm.
The guy who was giving me the information, it was his friend Savaya, if you remember him. And I
Yep.
think that now he's basically homeless, living in some homeless camp, doing some weird stuff. I don't know. I hope that he's okay because he did seem like a nice enough guy. But basically, like the trail he sent me down was that of the Ascended Masters program, which is this hermetic occultism type of stuff that started with, like if you look back, I just typed this to somebody right before I started this stream. We were talking about the Satanist stuff, right? The Satanist rabbit hole. And I was like, really, Crowley's Satanism, Aleister Crowley's Satanism, and Helena Blavatsky occultism were basically like the two original LARPs, right? Because we know that Crowley was a MI6 agent. We know that he worked for the CIA. we knew that he had done a lot of infiltration ops to basically use Satanism and base various psyops, you know, back around World War II. And so, you know, especially the Blavatsky stuff really spun off and formed a lot of these esoteric, apocalyptic cult movements that we see now. Everything from like, so, you know, like what we're talking about now, the Ascended Masters program, all the way to like what was called the I Am cult, which was very similar to that. And that's the one that Mike Flynn has been linked to, which also our friend Schoenberger is very linked to. In fact, his pseudonym was Thomas Saint Germain, which was, you know, part of the I Am cult kind of foundation. And so all of that stuff is connected to this, you know, Josiah's group of weird cultists. And they were a strange bunch. But ultimately what I did, you know, after I joined their discords and I attended a couple of meetings. And you know, ultimately I decided like these people aren't hurting anybody. Like, you know, they have strange beliefs and they really want to change the world. They're very dedicated to helping the world become a better place. They reject pedophilia. They don't know what the hell happened to Josiah. They don't condone that shit. He went off onto his own thing and it's not what we are, right? And so after a while, I just realized that they're not hurting anybody, right? At some point, you have to acknowledge that, like, yeah, people are kooky and weird, but like,
you can have whatever
that's
beliefs
the right to
you
be
want.
kooky and weird.
Sure. So yeah, maybe we'll go. Can we get into the Carl Spitz stuff?
Yeah, we can do that.
So I'd be surprised if many people in my audience know anything about this case. So you know, we've kind of laid the foundations of you looking into school shooters, Josiah Mizukami, a lot of these different things, and there are these strange groups behind that seem to pull the strings that lead to accelerationism and Satanism.
Yeah, the people pulling the strings behind 764 are the Odor Nine Angles guys, and that's been basically that's not something that I connected myself. That's what the DOJ has said. That so like the U.S. government is claiming this, right? Which raises a lot of questions I won't get into about like the activity of FBI informants in 09A and like how perhaps their infiltration op maybe got a little out of control, because now we've got these like satanic pedophiles running around hurting people. So you gotta kind of, it's a reason to be scrupulous there. But you know what, maybe you could even like after after this is done, and I know that you're gonna like edit it a bit, show that video of Kyle Spitz and his stepdad or his mom's boyfriend, because when people see that video they're gonna go, oh yeah, I saw that, which is kind of what happened last night, which is why this tweet really took off, because people started seeing this and be like, oh shit, there's way more context to this. Right?
Can you describe what happens in the video?
Yeah, I will. So basically, but like I said, we had already been kind of seeing the signs of the 764 group. And because we were interested in researching the Order of Nine Angles stuff, we were on the lookout for it, which is how I basically had the leg up on this story. So when I first saw that video, I didn't think anything of it at all. I was like, that was a weird, hectic video. What is happening here? So basically, it starts out with a guy on his bed and he's filming, and this Kyle Spitz was filming the video where his mom's boyfriend comes in the room, points a gun at him, is like, I'm gonna fucking kill you. And he's like, you're not gonna shoot me. And he sounds really drugged out. And his mom like runs in with her pants around her ankles. It's just real chaotic. It's like, what is, I know Salty Cracker made a YouTube video, and I think the title was family that looks like a bunch of meth heads shoot at each other. And I was like, yeah, that's accurate. That looks like what's happening here. Just like a really bizarre, hectic scene. So he gets up and he basically like provokes the mom's boyfriend to shoot him. Like, you are not going to shoot me. You're not going to do it. You're going to go to jail for life if you do it. And then he shoots him. Perhaps quite expectedly. And he misses him and shoots him in the ear. He grazes his ear. But in the video, you could just see this flash. And if you freeze frame it at the right moment, you can actually see the bullet leaving the barrel of the gun in a flame of fire. So it's just like this really bizarre scene. And anyway, so then you see like a couple drops of blood on the floor. Mom starts screaming, and the video kind of ends. Well, after that, we find out that Kyle Spitz, the guy who shot, he just had like a graze on his ear. It was not life-threatening or serious. And then after that, the stepdad or the mom's boyfriend barricaded himself in the house. There was a SWAT standoff and he killed himself. And so, you know, that's a dark twist that most people didn't get that context, right, of the video. Well, that video went really viral. I don't know why. I don't know what it was about that video that made it go viral. But you know, it made its way around. And but what I had noticed was, like, again, we were keeping our ears open for mentions of the 764 group already, because we'd already been looking into it. And I started to notice that there were victims in the comment section and victims tweeting about the incident and claiming that the person in the video who was shot in the ear, Kyle Spitz, was part of the 764 self-harm child extortion cult type network thing, right? And that they were victims of him. And I mean, probably just 10-15 minutes of researching this, I could see that it was true, right? Because these girls were posting evidence of it. And we found Kyle Spitz's Twitter account, which was linked to another kind of faction of this called Harm Nation, which again is just the most egregious content you can imagine, right? People carving "I love you, Kyle" into their arms and razor blades, right? And killing their cats and, like, you know, arranging their guts like into satanic looking shrines and stuff, to Kyle, or Criminal, or whatever his name was, Criminal, his like tag name. And there's a lot of these guys, they do operate the same way. They're basically just trying to produce the most extreme content imaginable. And most of the child pornography, that they use that to kind of groom their victims too. But it's very, like, the FBI has come out and said that the nature of the child pornography that they distribute is really extreme, like grievously injured children and disgusting, the worst stuff you can imagine, right? So this is the worst you can imagine. And so it doesn't take much time looking into Kyle Spitz to see that, yes, this is true. Like, he is in these Telegram groups. And also, this was our first window into the group, because while we'd been kind of looking out for them, we hadn't been like actively seeking them out. But a couple of times I had just kind of searched some various things on Twitter to see if I could find them, and had come up dry. Well, now all of a sudden, all of the members of this group are commenting on Twitter and you know, heckling the victims. And you can look at the victims and who's following them and see, like, all of the members basically. So we basically got, you know, our sights on the network. And so at that time, I know I asked the girls, a couple of the girls who were victims, you know, if they needed help, if I could help them in any way, because I felt bad, because, you know, of course, they're screaming into the void on social media about this stuff, and they sound crazy, right? We know that's not an insult, right? They're screaming about satanic pedophile cults. Of course they do. Most people aren't going to listen to them, right? No, they're you know, but at the time I did get in touch with a couple of them who said that, yes, we have contacted the police are investigating, they know about this stuff. So I said, okay, we'll kind of just, like, you know, let it slide, and kind of moved on with my life. But I had already tweeted about it once or twice, and made contact with a couple of victims. So then this is 2 weeks later, 2 weeks after the video went viral. Somebody sent me, it was actually funny, because I was going to log off for the night and have like a nice bath, and I had some wine. I was like going to do like a whole thing, right? I had all ready. And then I got this message from one of the victims. And they were like, "Kyle Spitz just killed his mom in a Telegram server. Here's the video of it." And I'm just like, what, you know, holy crap. So I take all this evidence from this source, and I'm going to say, like, at the time I thought, yeah, he killed his mom. I thought that this was a murder scene. Well, you don't actually see him killing his mom. What you see is the aftermath. You see her dead body on the ground, blood everywhere. You know, he's making a scene and sobbing, but also kind of sounds like he's trying not to laugh maniacally, like he staged the body around, like he was making content for his sick little group, you know? And so there was very strange. It was just really unnerving. And so at the time I said, okay, well, screw my bath. I guess I'm gonna have to, you know, call the fusion center. I'm going to call the FBI Fusion Center to see if I can figure out who to give this evidence to. Because at the time, I didn't know if his mom was actually dead, or if this was a hoax, or, you know. So I sent it to the Knoxville police through the Fusion Center, and they confirmed with me that she was dead. So they were like, yeah, no, she's dead. Like that really happened, right? And I'm like, and they told me at the time, they were like, it was a suicide. And I remember going, this is a fusion center guy who told me this, and I was like, did they see the same video I saw? Because how did she kill herself? Like, what's going on? That's very strange. It's only been 48 hours or so. So probably not time to do an autopsy, right? It was weird that they would say that it was a suicide to me. I just felt something about that felt strange. And then later they would change the narrative to say that it was an overdose, which again, okay, perhaps, but then what happened to her after that? Because there's a lot of blood. So then I guess we still haven't got an official autopsy report or any kind of official story. There no foul play suspected, which again I find very strange, especially considering the way he had tampered with the crime scene. He had clearly been trying to soak up blood on sheets, and he had blood on his hands, and I mean it was just a mess. But I digress, because they said that it was not suspicious, so I guess I'm just crazy. Maybe we'll find out more about it later with the FOIA. I don't know. Anyways, so after this happened, right, some of the victims were asking me, like, can you help us get this story out? Because we're tired of seeing, Law and Crime on YouTube put this guy front and center on a featured sidebar, video with 500,000 views, where they're like, oh, you poor victim. Oh, we're so sorry this happened to your family. We're so happy you're okay, blah, blah. Well, his victims are pissed because they're like, everybody's treating this guy like a victim, and he's like an evil monster, actually, right? And so they asked me kind of for help boosting the story, which I attempted to do multiple times, starting with the breaking, this woman is dead. The woman in the video is now dead, and it's a very suspicious crime scene, right? There's a suspicious scene around it. And also then I started to lay out to the public or my Twitter audience, here's the evidence that he's part of the 764 child abuse cult, right? And it was, I mean, I guess it got a little bit of traction, but we never really saw a really big interest in it, which was strange, because I'm like, don't people want to correct the record, right? Doesn't Law and Crime, who just interviewed this guy, and they specifically mentioned interviewing his mom, but she didn't come on camera. And I'm like, surely these people will want to know that this woman is dead, right?
Yeah.
They're Law and Crime. Don't you think that this is even juicier? This is even more of a plot twist. This is actually so much crazier than it was before. But again, they just never responded. None of the big accounts really took it up. So then, I don't know, for the last couple of weeks, we've just been trying to boost this. And in the process, I've been getting, these guys from 764 have been threatening me and threatening my family. And their biggest threat that they pose is swatting. They have really sophisticated methods for doxing and swatting people. One of those methods is they can spoof a government email and try to get emergency data from Twitter about you, which is pretty scary. And at first I didn't think that sounded too plausible, but later law enforcement confirmed with me that is actually a thing they can do. So law enforcement, because of course I reported it to law enforcement, and they took it very seriously. And that's when I knew that, oh shit, this is the real deal. Because before that, it hadn't really hit that this is a dangerous situation. But no, law enforcement got in touch with me, and they were like, no, seriously, this is pretty dangerous, right? You're in a pretty dangerous spot. So that didn't stop me, obviously. It just kept running my mouth because that's just who I am, right? Stack up, right? So over time, I guess we've just been trying to figure out who these guys are. We've been running OSINT on them and trying to kind of help compile some evidence from the victims, help connect them to resources. So that's basically what I've been doing, exclusively for the past couple of weeks, is just trying to connect victims and gather evidence and try to help put some of these guys behind bars, because they're really bad people and they need to go away. I don't care if they're 17 or if they're 47, they need to go to jail, right? And be away from society. And so we got our first victory when Kyle Spitz, the guy in the video, was arrested. This was just about 6 days ago, I guess. He was arrested by U.S. Marshals. And so at the time we didn't have any charging information, but we also knew it wasn't some kind of petty drug offense because he was arrested by U.S. Marshals, you know. So we knew that it was he was on in federal custody, no bail. He's not going to get bail. So this is very, very serious matter. We didn't get the charging documents until yesterday. They were filed by the court, and there was at least one count now of child sexual exploitation of a girl as young as 12 years old. They found the videos and stuff of her on his phone. I had to be careful, like kind of how much I say, because, you know, I do have some kind of privileged information that's been given to me by various people. But, you know, I think that there's a lot of victims, a lot more victims of this guy. And I think that a lot more of those victims are going to be found and added to the charges. So I think we're going to see like a formal indictment. It might be a while, but I think there will be multiple charges of child exploitation. And I guess I should mention that this isn't the first arrest either. And it won't be the last, because I think that these guys are about to start falling like dominoes. I just have a gut feeling, because the feds they're honing in on these guys, and they know it. We know it. They know it. They're scared. They're changing their Telegram usernames. They're going into hiding, but they're a big target of a law enforcement effort right now. And I think there's probably been like 5 others that we know of that have also been arrested in this group. And some of them have even been sentenced to like one of them was sentenced to 350 years. Another one was sentenced to 80 years. So they're not giving these guys leniency or anything like that either. They're putting them away forever. So yeah, that's basically what happened. And then I guess yesterday when I released the charging information, it was like a tweet that said like, breaking, this guy has been formally charged, right? We now know for a fact, and there's documented court proof, right? You can't dispute it anymore, that he is a part of this cult, this gang, this extortion network, and that he is charged with federal child exploitation. So that's when, like, then last night, you know, I didn't expect anything else to happen from my tweet because I hadn't gotten much traction since this whole thing started. But then somehow it just like blew up, and now it's everywhere. When I had my Twitter app wasn't even working this morning. I basically had to turn off all my notifications to get Twitter to work because the notifications were just too much for the app to handle. But like, there was probably like 6 million views on that tweet overnight. And they're still going. So now people have the rest of the story, right? Now people finally are going, oh my God, I remember this video, and there's so much more context, and this is the craziest thing to happen all year. So I'm hoping now that, like, you know, some bigger outlets will start issuing corrections, not corrections, but like, you know, like for example, the Daily Mail did a story about the original video. They need to do a follow-up, right?
Yeah.
I'm hoping that this will be enough for mainstream media to start, you know, doing that. So for the victims, you know, they deserve to see their story told correctly, I guess.
Far out. So these threats, I mean, how worried were you? I feel like this is not the first time you've received an overwhelming amount of threats online from shady characters, but this one definitely sounds like it was the most serious, given how serious the FBI was taking them.
Yeah. The FBI contacted me about it, which was really surreal, right? Because I mean, I guess before that it was a bunch of shit on Twitter, but then you know, and even the threats were just a bunch of shit on Twitter. But you know, when the FBI contacts me, I was like, oh yeah, I guess this is pretty legit, you know. And
how worried were you?
You know, man, I don't know. I was up. It was funny because like I kept kind of ping-ponging back and forth, right? Between like having these moments of being really paranoid and like being like, fuck it, I'm just gonna tweet out some more. And then like, you know, kind of bouncing around on how I felt about it. But ultimately, again, like when you can see these people when they're getting arrested, and these people are absolute degenerate drug users. They are they're not just like non-productive members of society, but they're non-functional members of society, right? Like the only thing that they know how to do is get online and threaten kids and threaten journalists. But the fact is that when you threaten a kid, that's one thing, that's bad. And police should take it seriously. But when you start threatening journalists, it seems the police and law enforcement take that even more seriously, right? And so like when you're out there sending terroristic threats to journalists, you got to know that like that's very illegal, and like that's gonna even create more attention on you. And so in some ways, when they're doing this, it was just creating more opportunities for us to, to find them. And it could even represent an opportunity for the police or the feds to arrest them and then seize their electronics and then get all of this information. So if that was my goal, to be bait in this whole thing, then it is what it is. But as far as, first of all, I don't think they could even find me. And second of all, we've been monitoring the landscape for mentions of me. So if I'm doxxed, I'll know, and I'll have some heads up. I live in Texas, and I live in an area of Texas where the police don't fuck around and the neighbors don't fuck around. Nobody fucks around here. So I don't think that it would be a very wise decision to kind of come into my neighborhood and start some shit, because we all have a lot of AR-15s, and there's, pretty much just cops everywhere living in my neighborhood. So it's not really, I feel pretty safe. I feel like I have the ability to protect myself and my family. And ultimately, if I didn't feel that way, I wouldn't have pursued it. I wouldn't have kept going if I felt like my family was actually in danger. But it's still unnerving. Like, it is still possible that these guys could find me and dox me, or SWAT, call in a bunch of bomb threats to my address, or whatever. And so it is a bit concerning, but yeah, I think I'm handling it all right.
Yeah. If anyone can, it's you. How old is Kyle Spitz?
24.
24. Okay. And wasn't he also, I was going through all your threads and all these random links to things he'd said, and a few threads on Reddit, but it seemed like he were also, the way he was able to kind of groom or poach his victims, underage kids, was he would really target like LGBTQI community, and he would pose as a cross-dresser, femboy, wearing dresses and things, and and in your thread you're saying, yeah, no, he's not that, he's not he's not trans, this is bait.
It's one thing but to say that, like, yeah, he's a femboy and likes a cross dress, but I think that that's something that a lot of kids these days are doing. And I'm kind of hesitant to throw judgment on that, because when I was a kid, it was like we were like these weird punk raver goth kid creatures. Like, what were we? I don't know. We were weird. Okay. Kids do weird shit. So it's like when I see somebody's like, oh, he's a femboy, I'm like, I don't know what that is. It sounds like a phase, right? To me, transgender is something that's much more easily defined, right? He is a man who wants to be a woman, and identifies as a woman. That's what transgender means to me. So you can say that he's one of these weirdo, I don't know, probably, yeah, but like, I don't think it's fair to say that he's trans. I've seen a lot of people saying that, and it's not fair. However, yeah.
No, I was under the impression that was just a bait. That wasn't anything part of his identity. It was more just a way of luring people in, young people in, or something.
I don't know, right?
Yeah, okay.
Because I mean, I don't know. Because the things that they say in their Discord chats aren't representative of reality, right? They're definitely putting on a show. And however, this is a common tactic that we're seeing more and more frequently. We are seeing adults pose as members of LGBT, and they use that to groom kids, because LGBT kids are very, they're confused, and they feel outcasted, and they feel disparaged and, discriminated against, right? They feel like nobody understands them. And that's a really great mindset for a kid to be in. That's very advantageous for predators, because they can give them the sense of community they desire, give them the validation, and validate all of their feelings and tell them that they're awesome. And I think that we should be talking about how gender confusion or LGBT in kids represents a vulnerability. That's something that predators target, and the FBI has even highlighted this in their bulletin about 764, saying that these guys actually specifically target kids kind of in that gender confused phase or whatever in their life. I don't want to say phase, because like many of them might be gay or whatever, but they just feel disparaged, and they feel like they need community and they need validation. And so that's what they're preying on. What I don't want, though, is for this to become like, oh, transgenderism is causing this. No, something else is causing this, and we know what it is, and we're telling you what it is. And if you try to distract us onto some transgender tangent, to me, why, that's suspicious. It's suspicious to me when these large right-wing accounts start harping on this kind of stuff, because you're misleading everyone. You're misleading us away from accelerationism. And I see this over and over and over again. Right? Even the left does this with white supremacy, mass shooters, and gun control. And you're like, you're leading people away from the cause. Why? Why is that? Is that just something that accelerationists are kind of, I guess, controlling the narratives and like using certain things to their advantage, like the fact that these right-wing creators love like their clicks and they know what pisses people off, right? But then you also have to consider that, like, and I've talked about this before with the transgenders kind of, I'll admit that we are seeing a few more transgender-ish type of shootings. Not very many. They make it seem like there's a lot more than there are. Okay. But we are seeing kind of an uptick in that. And it makes me wonder if they are targeting that community now. And the reason they're targeting, if that is true, the reason they'd be doing it is because they're monitoring social media and they know what pisses people off. They're looking for the most inflammatory subject that they can use to associate these terror attacks with. So because, they know that's going to spark the most controversy. So in a way, we're determining who's the next mass shooter is, simply by the things that we allow to, these narratives that we allow to consume us and make us angry. And so this is why I don't like them going, oh, well, he's transgender and all this. Well, first of all, he wasn't transgender. Second of all, it could have very well just been, a ruse to groom kids, which we've seen happen many times. And then again, thirdly, no, transgenderism is not the cause of this, right? There are very possibly foreign actors at the very top of this that we should identify and recognize as a terror threat. This is the output of one of these kind of branches of this terror, decentralized terror organization that we're calling accelerationism. This is the output of one of those initiatives. And so that's what I want people to understand. I don't want people getting distracted with the transgender stuff. If that makes sense.
It's such a mindfuck to think about the behind the scenes things that could be contributing to why everyone's losing their fucking minds at the moment. I think it's very, the media has a lot to answer for. There's a lot of, conspiracy theories to suggest it's the higher ups or the elites that are pulling the strings, but it very easily could be smaller groups of people that are just creating rot from the inside. Because everyone's, we are in the internet age. We have access to all the information. We have, things are very different now in the last 10 years. Things are very, very different now to how they've ever been. The consumption.
We have aggregate cybernetic analysis now, meaning that we have a lot of AI capabilities and data scraping and data collection that these groups, these think tanks and these NGOs and these nonprofit groups basically pay or they fund these large scale data collection initiatives so that they can see how we behave. They can see what makes us mad. They can see what degree it makes us mad. They can see which demographics get angry. And so all of that stuff can be used to enact various political initiatives, which is kind of the next layer. It's like kind of another layer of this, is that, and this is something that I haven't put out a lot of information about yet, but I did kind of expose something related to this in December with the DHS NGOs that were targeting the manosphere.
All right.
It's basically this, this what I call the terrorism industrial complex, where grant money comes from like Congress gives DHS all this money, taxpayer money, and then they have these grant programs, and these NGOs, they take the grant money and then they do all these studies on people and tell DHS, well, the terrorists are actually the white males in the manosphere now. We need to censor them, and it's super politically motivated and biased, and there's no transparency or oversight, and it's all a complete sham. It's a racket where people are constantly making money to basically produce these boogeymen so that the government, they can justify, some politician somewhere can justify writing a bill to censor them. And so it's pretty icky. There's also a lot of, this is some stuff you're going to see. It's starting to come out now with something called the Sunset Papers. So I won't get into that because it's not my expertise, but I've kind of found another group that's looking into the same aspect of this situation as I am, and finding a lot of these think tanks that are basically, political action groups, or PACs that are kind of using influencers on the internet to push certain agendas. That's very real and that's happening. I call them plants because I think a lot of times like they identify with that ideology, right? They might say, yeah, I'm a liberal and I agree with all these things. But the things that they're actually putting out, the debates they're doing, the stances they're taking are really guided by this political group. That once there's these big influencers, right, to take certain stances on subjects for political reasons. And so I'm not call them actors, but they're kind of actors, right? They're not being genuine with you. They're not telling you the truth about where their funding is coming from. They're being paid by political organizations. And a lot of all of this divisive tactics, I think, originates there. I'll go ahead and say it. I think Libs of TikTok is one of these creators that's funded by dark money, right? By this, these people are probably being paid, and it's probably getting tumbled into all sorts of sources and laundered who knows where, right? But ultimately, somebody is paying for that giant account to keep pushing this narrative, push. And that narrative becomes a hot button topic that the accelerationists prey on when they're grooming kids, grooming mass shooters. And so, yeah, it really does make you wonder what's actually happening here and who are the key players. I don't think, we might never know because they're so, they're so obscured. They're so well hidden. But I definitely have a conspiratorial sense, right? That a lot of these big, huge political accounts like that are being driven by, they're basically puppets. They're not acting on their own autonomy. And you could see that, like what I'm not going to talk too much about it, but like the Taylor Lorenz, Chaya Raychik, how do you say her name? The Libs of TikTok creator was interviewed by Taylor Lorenz from Washington Post. And I don't like Taylor Lorenz either. Like, I don't like the Washington Post very much either. I don't like either of them because I just don't like the media. However, she was asking Chaya these softball questions, and you could see her just going, well, like, how did she get her on the spot like that? Because this woman was not able to defend her own stances on things, her own ideology. Like, you could just tell there's nothing there. She's a puppet.
I saw that. I thought the same thing. I thought it was very weird answers, very non-answers. Just like, are you just hyper defensive and cagey, or do you actually not have answers for these basic questions?
Why are you lying to people, Chaya? Why are you lying to people? It's like, this is bad. Like, who allowed her to do this? This is a really, really optically terrible thing.
Yeah. Why do you think that the media is so slow on these kinds of things? Is it just too complex that it's too easy to dismiss? Because, I mean, even looking up this Carl Spitz stuff, and again, like the stuff that you've posted, the FBI call outs, the proof that the mum has died, I found snapshots of his conversations on Reddit, the photos of him on Twitter, all dressed up, and satanic symbolism written in blood that was linked to him. Like, there's enough evidence to show, this is true. But looking up the articles, it is all still just on the viral video of this poor guy getting shot by his crazed mum's boyfriend. There's enough there to follow up now. It doesn't seem like many people have or are willing to, or is it just too, is it all just too politicized that once you start talking about a satanic cult, it's just going to be this big backlash? Or like, what do you think is the reluctance to cover this stuff? And do you think is there any journalists that you know of that are really getting to the bottom of this and actually uncovering it? Is coverage coming?
So Ken Silva, who's a reporter friend of mine, and he's the one him and I have been behind the scenes doing a lot of the research on this. And he is fast. I mean, he's got like, it seems like he wakes up in the morning and does his like, standard searches to see if this person's been arrested, see if the charges are there. So he could be the first to put it out. And he puts out really good, in my opinion, very reliable and very accurate articles about it. So that's it's Ken Silva with Headline USA who's been putting this stuff out. But for your other question, like, let's give it some time. Okay. I'm still trying to be generous, because when I started breaking this stuff, like, yeah, we can verify some things like that the mom is dead, but a lot of it still sounds really extravagant, from law and crimes perspective. Well, yeah, some random person on Twitter is claiming all of these things, but I'll wait until there's an arrest or a charge, right? Because again, an arrest doesn't even, like, yes, he was arrested and I know what he was arrested for, but like, there's no proof of like him being arrested for this thing. Today there is, or for the past 24 hours, there has been proof of that. And so I'm hoping that that's enough to get these guys to go, oh yeah, all right, well, he has actually been charged for child sexual exploitation. Like, this is real. We should take this seriously now. And I'm really hoping now that these, maybe they were waiting on that actual proof. Or maybe they're just not seeing it because, I'm deboosted. I'm definitely not one of these big, huge platforms that organically gets millions of views on all of my posts. Now this one did go pretty viral, the one that I posted yesterday. So I'm hoping that that will spur some mainstream coverage. It seems to me like places like the Daily Mail, they wrote an article about the original video. This is straight up the Daily Mail's alley. They would absolutely put out an article about, the Satanic 764 cult. They would do that because I've read plenty of articles from them along those lines. Law and crime, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if they're a lot more neutral, so they might not. Vice has already put one out. It did mention Kyle Spitz. Because I guess that was probably too like early breaking. When Vice came out with their article about a couple weeks ago, I didn't really like that. I didn't like their article because we talked about before, they kind of made it seem like kids were all doing all of it. They didn't emphasize enough that there were adults preying on kids, which upset me. They also accused other outlets of inciting a satanic panic. And that made us all kind of look at each other and be like, who are they talking about? Because we're the only other people covering it, right? And it seems like we're too irrelevant for Vice to even nod at, right? But also, who else could they be talking about? So we're kind of side-eyeing them like, what are you talking about, me? How have I, Satanic, made this into a sensationalized story, right? Because I've been very clear this entire time what I think. That I don't think that the Satanism part is really relevant at all. I think it's important to report it accurately because that's the facts, right? And also because some of their occultist aesthetics are kind of the calling signs of this particular group. And we want people to be aware, we want parents to be aware of what to look out for. And so if you're just hiding the satanic part because you're scared it's too political, you're not giving the public the information they need to know. And so that's why I will continue to report this in the same way that I've been reporting it. The other people who put something out were the CBC, the Fifth Estate. It's a Canadian investigative journalist outlet. They put out a really good YouTube video. It was like a documentary, short documentary about the group, and it focused around another one of these baddies named Caleb Merritt. And this guy was a monster. He groomed a 12-year-old girl online, went to her house and set up a camp in the woods behind her house where he raped her and groomed her and eventually kidnapped her. He was caught and arrested, and he's the one who got sentenced to 350 years in jail for his role in the club. But the Fifth Estate, if you want to look that up, they've got a really good video that kind of outlines the O9A connection. I mean, so even the Order of Nine Angles connection has been widely reported on by mainstream outlets. And so to me, that like this isn't something that people could go, that sounds crazy. Yes, it does, but it's also completely verifiably true and has already been reported on by multiple legitimate outlets. And so there's no reason to doubt it,
Yeah. Kyle was pretty young. What do you think would lead someone to get into this or take on this ideology where you're doing the most evil things you could imagine? manipulating kids to carve your name in their arms, trying to talk people into suicide, trying to talk people into generating child porn. What the fuck turns someone?
Well, they're bad people, but if I'm speaking to about Kyle specifically, and I'm not trying to like make you sympathize with him, because even if there is some room for sympathy from like him being mistreated in his life or whatever, it doesn't change my opinion that he's a monster and needs to be locked away from society, right?
Yeah, but I still need
Plenty
to
of people
understand
are
it, you
plenty of
know?
people are abused and turn out just fine, right?
Hmm.
So I don't like to use that as an excuse. However, I have been told things from like some of his victims that, like, for example, like he would tell them that his parents were heroin addicts his whole life, and he remembered shooting heroin into their necks when he was 9 years old, right? You got to consider that he was, they're very heavy drug users. That his mom was doing heroin with him in a motel when she died. These guys are selling drugs, selling fentanyl laced pills to kids. They're selling Xanax and stuff like that. So they're also very drugged. The amount of Xanax, like I have a picture pulled up right now. I can see it in my thumbnails over here of his mouth with like 12 Xanax bars in his mouth, swallowing them at once. I
Hmm.
mean, so this is not a person who can even feel, right? Like
Yeah.
he has dulled his senses with drugs. And I've heard from other victims that they have kind of required them to do the same, like force them to take drugs, force them to do drugs on camera. And that was getting them addicted to drugs, again, another very common grooming tactic, right? Who else is vulnerable to grooming? Kids who take drugs, and so really a lot of sad stuff. But interestingly enough, we could talk about this a bit, but like the whole 764 thing, it didn't necessarily just originate with the O9A. This came from something called Com Connect, which was like another one of these edgy kids pushing each other to be worse and worse and worse and worse till it just metastasized into this thing. And it actually started on a Minecraft server like over a decade ago. And it's gone through various iterations of like, degeneracy. And I think that now this is worse than definitely worse than some of the earlier calm days. And part of it is that, these guys who are up at the higher ranking, this was also something that was confidentially disclosed to me from the very inside of the group, saying that the Satanist stuff, like these guys who are making the girls do these things, right? Like Kyle Spitz and them, they don't understand what Satanism is. They're not like philosophical satanic scholars, right? They're being told by higher ranking members that they need to use specific symbols and specific aesthetics and get the girls to do specific things in order to build like their rank in the group. So it's almost like becomes like a gang initiation, right? To say like, oh, if you can get them to do this, we'll will reward you in some way, right? And so in a way, it's a competition for them to kind of move up ranks faster than others. And I think that which is even more reason to suspect that at the higher levels of this thing, there is something like O9A up there, because that it does sound like something that they would do, right? Try to get these kids to use specific aesthetics, just maybe to make it more of a public, people more afraid of it, I guess, if that makes sense.
Hmm. So what's like, again, what's in it for someone like Kyle? Is it, I mean, you kind of compared it to like a gang initiation, and I guess you could say the same thing for these people who, troubled youth who join gangs, and part of the gang initiation is you got to go, I don't know, hypothetically, got to go kill someone. And if you've killed someone, you're in the gang or something. Is it just kind of that simple? They're just kind of broken and they want to be tough?
No,
And is it in a different reincarnation of that same psychology? Or do you like, what is in it for someone like Kyle? Why would you go against all your value,
I mean,
anything
I don't think he was raised with
yeah.
any values, first of all, because his
But
parents are clusterfucks just like him. I mean,
didn't
they're,
didn't you say
drug addicts and
his
stuff.
mum worked for Lockheed Martin?
Yeah. And his dad also seems to work for Lockheed or some other, his dad has a security clearance. Um, and
So they're not.
we talk about him. It's very strange. I think his mom was like an administrative person. I don't think she was like an engineer or anything. Now, this guy has called himself a government security contractor. So, yeah,
Yeah,
presumably,
it's not like broken
very strange.
trailer park trash. It's
Yeah.
like these are kind
Well,
of functional members of
and
corporate life.
that's what Ken Silva had asked this guy when he was interviewing. He was like, you're clearly intoxicated right now, like talking to me, like how do you have a secret security clearance? Like, how did you get that being a drug addict? And like, this guy just got really angry. He's like, you have no idea what it's like. Drug addicts can live perfectly healthy lives. And like, I mean, it's just weird.
Is this
We
the
were like,
dad you're talking about?
yeah, the
Mm.
dad, the living dad. Yeah.
Mm.
He had been running cover for Kyle for a while. We caught him in multiple lies. He should not have been talking to journalists at
Mm.
all. Like that was not a good call. He was clearly intoxicated and just saying crazy stuff. But yeah, he did tell us that he was a government contractor in Virginia with a secret security clearance, which definitely was strange, really weird.
It gets weird. It just gets weirder in every
Just keeps getting
direction.
weirder. Yeah. But as far as like, I wanted to answer your question though about, why he's doing it. And of course, I'm not going to psychoanalyze this crazy person. Of course, he's on drugs and numbing himself and all of that. And there's the fame and the notoriety aspect, and he's an evil person. But like I've seen messages between him and a victim that were posted on Twitter where she asked him, like, why are you doing this to me? And he just said, I don't know, for my own personal pleasure, I guess.
Mm. Getting a kick out of manipulating, harming,
That's it.
power, just just psychopathic tendencies, you know.
Yeah, psychopathic tendencies. I mean, and again, this is big, but like as far as the really bad actors, I mean, there's not that many, right? And the number of psychopaths in the world might surprise you, right?
Mm.
And
Mm.
the number of kids who are being kind of or young adults who have these psychopathic tendencies and are in these specific gaming communities, Roblox, Minecraft, where they find like-minded people and metastasize. So yeah, I do think that they are sick, disgusting criminals. And I mean, this guy has abused a 12-year-old girl. And one of the most horrific things about this group, I think that's even worse than like, some of the other groups that I've investigated is that, their victims have carved their names into their bodies. They have carved their abusers' names into their bodies and they're going to wear that scar for the rest of their life. Like they're literally scarred for life on the outside. And and they're kids, they're 12, 13 years old, right? Just very traumatic. I think the priority for me has always been trying to like find these victims and convince them to let me help them connect with local resources because I'm not a social worker or anything, but if they can talk to me, if I can help them out, if I can convince them, some of these kids, right, to seek help, I think that's like absolutely critical because man, these kids have a devastatingly high suicide rate. I mean, the suicide rate among this group of kids is astronomical. Like, and it just breaks my heart as a mom, right? Like, I've actually been talking to the mom of one of the girls. So I think she was maybe 14 when she was abused by Kyle Spitz. Um, and I'm talking to this mom for several weeks and like just completely normal woman with other kids and a normal life and have no idea how this happened to their kid, right? I hear this all the time. This is one thing I always give people pushback on because they're like, well, how did this parent not know and blah blah blah. These kids have bad parents, and I don't think that's true. I think that's a cop out. I think that honestly this could happen to anyone, right? Kids are real sneaky. Kids will hide stuff from you, right? And they're being groomed. They're being exploited by really manipulative, sinister individuals. And so it's heartbreaking to hear these parents talk about how, their kids are suffering and their whole families are suffering. I mean, it's just really awful.
God, what a massive spanner in the works. If kids have depression as it is, and especially when they go through puberty and get hormonal, and it's tough for young kids or early adults or whatever teens. And throw like a sinister psychopath in the mix that's chatting to them while they're gaming, which you would have no idea because they just got their headphones on. I mean, how do you
Right.
even navigate that? Fuck, the internet can be just the most dark, twisted place. I mean, Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't, yeah,
Yeah.
it's just I forget whether I asked this. How big do you think the 764 cult is?
Um, Pretty big. I think it's bigger than O9A.
Oh, really? So
Yeah.
what, hundreds?
Probably, yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. I
And
mean,
do
some of
you,
these groups, some of these big groups, Telegram groups have like 200 or 300 uh members. That doesn't mean a lot of them are victims, but then you got to think that a lot of these victims, these kids, like say there's a 14-year-old girl in there, she's out there doxing, swatting people for them. She's been brainwashed into thinking that she's been brainwashed and manipulated into committing other crimes against other kids. So in that way, Vice is right. Yeah, there are kids that are being groomed to hurt other kids. That's part of it. Part of it is getting them to do it to other kids, which is really sinister. And so even though I would consider that part of the group, like I still consider them victims. And when I'm looking for like actual, like, you know, the group members that are causing this real sick psychopaths, I'm looking for like people who are older, people who are actually manipulating people rather than just extorting and blackmailing kids into doing these things. And those people, I mean, I don't know how many, but a lot of them have been arrested. I would say less than 100, but maybe more than a dozen.
Right. Right.
You know, but the reach of them is also massive, because you have like these people who are the bad actors, right? And then you have their impact, their ripple, which is also, you know, one thing I've been talking about is like, you know, they're also out there inspiring other people to start and to do it themselves. And so because this aesthetic is getting out there, and because they're spreading it in certain communities, on very unhealthy communities on Twitter, for example, people with eating disorders are targeted. People who are already self-harming are targeted. And so, you know, they have these various communities that they basically get victims from. And they're out there, you know, expanding their reach. So once we arrest Kyle, there'll be another one. You know, when does it end, and how do we get it to it? How do we stop it? You know, so we're not constantly trying to track these guys down.
Yeah. What does 764 mean? The number?
I've been told that only the very top ranking people know. And to get to that level, you have to be very high ranking to understand what it means. Probably some goofy esoteric nonsense. I guess I could point out that 7 plus 6 plus 4 also equals 17, which corresponds to the letter Q and was used in all of the QAnon LARPs.
Yep.
But I won't. I didn't say that. You didn't hear me say that. Erase it from your mind.
Yeah. Connecting the dots. Do you have any idea of what their kind of core beliefs are? The things that would determine them to be a cult, or their philosophy?
Wait, what the whats are?
Their core beliefs or philosophy, or the
yeah.
I don't know, tenets that kind of make up them being a cult to begin with?
I don't really think that, so, you know, obviously they use a lot of the, some of them are out there doing satanic occult stuff, but a lot of them are just adopting the aesthetics from the high people who are higher ranking. So you got to understand that there's a layer above this that seems to be, according to my sources, there's a layer up there that seems to be more of the ideologically driven aspect. And these guys are more of just the go perform our sinister acts for us
Foot
to
soldiers.
cause chaos and, you know, corrupt the youth and all of this evil, haha, you know, it's kind of corny, but like, you know, evil, like they want to spread evil. And you know, that falls right in line with the accelerationist goal of corrupting our youth and subverting our people and creating chaos and division and collapse, right? So ultimately, I think that that's what it is. If we're talking about a cult, right, what distinguishes it from just I would say that cult is probably not the right word in this case. It has some components of a cult, but it's lacking most of the formal ones that you would associate with it. Now, the Order of Nine Angles calls themselves a cult, but again, I still don't agree that that's really the right definition of a cult, right? You don't have this one single charismatic leader and the isolation and like, you know, well, you have the isolation, but you don't have the commune, like the community, right? It's decentralized. And so by nature, it's not a cult because it's decentralized, if that makes sense. And the definition of a cult is like a communal thing, in the same sense that QAnon was. We could call that a type of like a meta cult. There's another word been floating around called meta cult, and that's a lot more of this like this new kind of phenomena that we're seeing, like QAnon, where like, well, there wasn't a real central leader with a real structured movement kind of thing. However, it was still a group of people working towards a common goal, being manipulated and exploited in a harmful way by people who are kind of above them or behind the scenes, even though these people are hidden. So, I think this would be more of a meta cult than like an actual cult, like we would think of like the Manson cult,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean the QAnon thing. Yeah, interesting how it kind of was a cult because there was no centralized leader apart from Trump, but I don't think he was. I mean, I don't know, but I don't think he was like particularly involved in it. I think he probably signaled to it a few times to get some votes, but that's about it. But they did have the whole the God. They did have God on their side in their minds, so there was this kind of divine messaging that they all believed in, which does tie into, a power that's greater than you, and a mission that's greater than you. But yeah, God, it's such big, complex and heavy topics to really probably get your head around things like accelerationism or groups of people out there, organizations of people out there that are doing these things. It's easier to write off. It is easier to write off. But then when people like you do unearth these groups and the law enforcement seems to take it very seriously, back it, make arrests, and there is a trail of evidence that leads to that. You do have to probe as to what are they all about, what are their goals, what are their motives, and again back to just that like Josiah thing, which just seemed to be a crazy lone operator. Just the stuff that I was able to see, some of the people that he'd interviewed, and then if you just do a little background check on some of the other people he'd interviewed, and then you could see that they were in these other groups. Like, yeah, I saw it. I saw it. I
Yeah.
saw that it's
And
there.
people like Josiah, but I don't think that he had the mental faculties to really see through the cult thing, because he was so far gone. But people like that, right? These rogue people who splinter off of the larger cult movement, or larger, not even a cult, but ideological movement. Those are the ones that tend to go on and form the way more sinister death cults, right? The apocalyptic Heaven's Gate, right? Those kind of those really extreme radical versions of specific ideologies. And when you see those guys splintering off and trying to create a cult, like we saw with Josiah, we were like, yo, this needs to be addressed because like this guy, we don't know what this guy's capable of. This could be the new Heaven's Gate. We got to stop this right now. Yeah, cut it out. We got to stop this. And you and I both know that, like, once that person's hit the God complex phase, right? I'm the Messiah. It's over, dude.
See ya.
It's over. Don't even try talking sense into them. They're gone.
Yeah. Was it Skyview Design? Was that his cult?
Yeah, that's it.
Skyview Design.
Skyview Design. Yeah.
Yeah,
He had such great graphics. It's like he had really good video editing skills, right?
It was so funny. It's so many little tiny companies that he'd set up, and that you click on them, and they're just these empty pages with all the graphics, but no substance.
Just a skeleton, yeah.
Yeah, no substance anywhere, but so many different.
Gold
Anyway,
coin, right?
yeah. I mean, and
Yeah,
another one.
that's.
Sorry, you go.
I was going to say, like, the DAO, the DAO component of this was another thing that was shared by some of these other cults that were tangent to him. This decentralized autonomous organization, which would be like a governance protocol that would, like, basically their commune is managed by this decentralized cryptocurrency, right? And it's really obscure concept that has only been taken, like when you talk about DAO, usually people are talking about like cryptocurrency schemes and stuff, right? But here it seems to be one of the few examples of people using a DAO and applying it to a communal structure, trying to apply the same concept of like basically AI, right? AI governance to like a commune of people. And that's something that I've also been seeing in other places kind of coming up, and like maybe we're seeing just an early glimpse of like something in the future that might be way more impactful in terms of like how people are forming communes and stuff like that. Very interesting.
Yeah. I mean, even with the school shooter docuseries he did on Bobby Cremo, who was the young guy who went out and shot up a mall, I think, or no, it was a parade.
A 4th of July parade.
Yeah.
Allegedly.
But yeah, I mean, the whole rabbit hole that you take everyone down on that was he had, similar kind of unusual occult symbology that he would put in his pretty crude video clips. You then linked it to a lot of the his idols and rap heroes because he was a rapper. His rap heroes, which was this kind of
Brooklyn hip
Brooklyn-based
hop.
hip hop
Yeah.
scene and awesome music too.
I know. I
Really
know. I
great
always say this, like,
stuff.
I'm glad that I learned about Pro Air and Capital Steez because like they
Capital
have great
Steez, that's
music.
it. Yeah,
Yeah.
really, really cool. And I'd known some of the songs, but doing the whole background thing on the ideas that Capital Steez was involved in,
Mhm.
it's pretty complex.
Mhm.
He was putting these stickers around everywhere that looked like swastikas. That was his
Yeah.
logo.
I mean, he was
And
really absorbed in the 2012 doomsday
mm,
apocalypse kind of cult movement. It was, and in fact, I had a person recently who I talked to about this who called it an ARG. They were like,
alternate
yeah, it was
reality game.
actually, yeah, they said
Mm,
that the whole 2012 doomsday thing that Steve's got basically caught up in. Again, he had the Messiah complex. He was God. He was there. He was the
yep.
savior. He was a chosen one. And he believed in that so strongly that he killed himself
Yeah.
in
Jumped
hopes
off
that
a
he would come
building.
back in 2047 as the Messiah to lead all the chosen people to, salvation. So, really out there stuff when people go down those like real esoteric religious kind of and, you don't call them all cults, but new age philosophy, right? New age
Mm,
religious movements. That's a really common theme in a lot of these things is people who subscribe to new age religious movements. They tend to be people who are much more prone to magical thinking. And magical thinking is, and also, if you have somebody who's kind of into this kind of new age religious movement and are also, mentally ill, it's a really volatile mixture that somebody could use to convince this person to do all sorts of things. You know, convince them to kill themselves and create a posthumous cult, which I just call Capital C's the first example I've ever seen of a posthumous cult. Like his cult did not begin until he died. And now there are a group of people out there on the internet who are still convinced that he is a savior, who Messiah, who's coming back in in 2047 to lead everyone to salvation. And they're very involved in gematria and a lot of these esoteric occult new age type of movements. And it's really bizarre to see these people who still are kind of in this cult of Capital C's even after he's dead. Um,
wow, that's
that
crazy.
said, like I don't like I feel like I went way off like track. I went way off the into the weeds with that deep dive. I think I don't I now I kind of doubt or I'm hesitant to put that out there right now and say this is what caused him to do all these things. I think it was an underlying factor for whatever somebody was kind of putting in his head. But I have a lot more information now than I did back then. And I ended up getting a lot of information that made me doubt my entire premise about my conclusions,
Mm.
and which led me to ultimately take the docu-series down and say I'm gonna chill for a bit and see kind of what happens because he's going to trial. The trial date's been set for February 2025. I will be there in the audience in the front row watching it all go down, sitting with the family, and absorbing everything because there is so much around this particular shooting. The online footprint was so large. There's so many moving parts, so many strange people involved. That and, there's a lot of things that don't make sense. I'm gonna be real. It doesn't seem to me like he could have shot the people from the roof position that he was in, unless the bullet could have somehow taken a right, a 90-degree turn. Some of the logistics of it did not seem right. I started to really just doubt that the whole thing went down the way they said it did. So, anyways, there's a
What do you
trial
think?
coming up, and
What do you
so
think? He's a pawn and it was aided with other people?
yes, I do. I do. I think
Mm.
there were other people there. I think there was a second shooter. I I'm skeptical now. Like, I have reasonable doubt that he shot anyone. And, you know, I'm not a juror, but at the same time, I'm looking forward to the trial because I'm hoping that maybe some of my questions will be answered by like ballistics evidence, right? Like maybe they have some like really convincing evidence that I don't even know about that will change my mind. And so I'm kind of holding out. You know, I'm planning on making a whole new docu-series about it, obviously, or podcast maybe. But I really just want to see what the trial has to offer. Maybe I don't want to jump the gun again, so to speak, you know, but I have a lot of doubts about his involvement in that. And it's a really complex situation. We could do an entire another topic about it, but like, it's
Yeah.
wild.
Well,
Like, I very much doubted myself many, many times.
well, I mean, did you just pick him just as a random case? Like, is there something about his case that made you go down that rabbit hole? Because I'm just wondering, you know, how many school shooters, for example, how many mass shooters have um, really crazy ideologies or are involved with other key players. I mean, manipulative bad actors as well. Because I mean, if you think about, I
Yeah.
mean, in the US, the mass shooters, you know, I mean, yeah, the surface level is the gun debate, but the maybe on a deeper level is, I mean, even with serial killers, the people that commit extreme acts, like usually have very extreme ideologies to back those up, like Richard Ramirez,
Mhm.
you know,
Which is the
hardcore
interesting thing
Satanist.
about Primo is that he didn't really seem to have that. You
Right.
know, like he wasn't a white supremacist. He wasn't a, you know, like he didn't seem to have any of those things. People had incorrectly claimed that he did, but when you really look into it, you can see that that wasn't true. Well, to answer your question though, the reason that I think that I went so deep into this one is simply because the opportunity existed for me to do so. So I had looked into other mass shootings before. I mean, I was in a stage of my life where pretty much as soon as I heard it happen, like I was turning on the live news and we were searching for information so we could see his Instagram page before they nuke it, right? Because they take everything down and then there's no more trace of it all. And the difference between that and Bobby is that most of them in Bobby Cremo was that he had put so much things on the internet, right? He had built an alternate reality game that he was trying to use to promote his music that a lot of people I think mistook for having some like serious significance into the shooting. I now doubt that. I don't know if they did or not. But at the same time, like he had such a wide footprint that it gave us the opportunity. And it wasn't just me, right? Because I still remember this is like something that I'll never forget. The number of people who started basically on Reddit, right? Like people investigating it on Reddit, people who are curious for their own reasons, formed a Discord server. And there were hundreds of people in this Discord server perusing through his information and his footprint and trying to like, you know, get all the information. And we started to realize some of them were real weirdos. Some of the people in there were very strange. Like you would call them like murderabilia types where they just wanted to get all of this. They were obsessed with mass killers, hybristophiles. But ultimately I did connect with a couple of really good researchers in there, and you know, we splintered off into our own group and started to do our own more productive work. And so me and this small cell, we ran down all this information, and there was just so much to see and do, right? It wasn't most of the stuff like it most mass shooters, they had a manifesto online. You read it and you were like, nah, it's really just a copycat of Christchurch. And there's also some very strange things that has been mentioned in the media, but there's really no footprint. There's nowhere else for us to go, right? This one just enabled us. It was an opportunity to go way deeper than any other mass shooter because so much existed online for, you know, opportunity existed for us to do it. Now, I do also think that this was a strange one. I do think there was also there happened to be something special about this one as well. That you know, made a lot of people more interested in like, you know, figuring out, because there was a lot of robust. I mean, this, you know, this is the interesting part. I'll write a book about it one day, I'm sure. You know, but like, you know, going from seeing this like this evil face on the news who committed this shooter, what a monster, lock him up, okay, and move on with your life. You know, this person, you know, he had an identity, he had a family, he had friends, He had other members of his, real life world who were trying to look for answers too. He had a personality. He was an online, kind of an online troll, but ultimately, there's a lot of videos and stuff where you can just see his personality, and you start to see him as a human being, an actual person, right? And the more you look into his past and the more you talk to his friends and family, you feel like you know this person without having even met him. And you feel like he would never do something like this, right? Like, we're not talking about a Kyle Spitz type figure who's was a heroin addict his whole life and drug problems and committed petty crime and just a bad person, where you had all these red flags. So a lot of mass shooters, you'll see red flags for a mile, right? And he didn't have any of those. He just seemed like a nice guy, like, who had a lot of friends, honestly. And that's not your typical mass shooter MO. Most of the times you're seeing a very isolated, very terminally online, very maybe racially, someone who'd fallen into like some kind of white supremacy rabbit hole and had kind of become an extreme troll, and hateful, like kind of indoctrinated to some hateful ideology. And we just don't see that. The thing is, it's a mystery. We don't know what actually happened or why, if he did this and why, right? So there's a lot of intrigue around it. And yeah, I mean, it's personal for me now. Like, I've connected with his family, right? And I've shared hours on the phone with them, and it just really got to know the people in his life. And so I can't say I'd ever do this again. It's probably not something I would recommend. I don't think I want to ever be in a situation again where, like, I feel like I need to be at the trial because I'm so involved. I would prefer to not have that happen again.
Yeah.
Because it's very stressful and consuming. So yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. What's your kind of overall goal with a lot of the research you do? Is it just genuinely trying to protect young people from, or is it just following your curiosity, or is it a bit of everything?
I think it's
What
a bit of
does what?
everything. Yeah. I don't know. I would say, like, I must have something going on with me to, like, enjoy this, because it's like some of it's really like this, getting these threats from these gang members and having to deal with law enforcement and stuff for my own safety, like, has been kind of it's been very stressful. I say
Kind of
it's been
stressful.
very stressful, right? You would think that after the stuff that we went through, right, with the looking behind the curtain, behind the QAnon curtain, right, that I would have probably just been like, I'm out, I'm gonna go retire and not have to put myself through that again. But
I think
I
you
don't
did
know.
say that at the time.
I did. Well, yeah, and it's because I keep saying I'm gonna retire, and it's like this old cop movie where you've got this old, like, battle-worn cop who's like, oh, I retired, and then he gets a call and it's like, sir, the president needs your help, and he's like, damn it, here we go. Like, like, people keep bringing the stuff to me and then I can't turn it down because of my own curiosity. So I think that's what happens. I mean, that's what happened with this Kyle Spitz thing. Somebody just sent me a video of his dead mom, and I'm like, I was about to take a bath and relax tonight. Now my life is flipped upside down for the next, month or so. So.
And just quickly, there is no explanation of how she died yet, other than that person saying it was suicide. There's no reason to believe that Kyle killed his mum. Well, there's reason to believe, but not solid evidence.
I don't know. Yeah, I think that we need to get a FOIA on the autopsy, because I don't know if we can even do that. I don't know I think it's depends on the state here in the US, what their laws are. Some people consider the autopsy records to be personal, private, confidential, and they will only release it to family. So if that's the case, we may never know, except for, we know that the police have said there was no foul play. Now, one thing that the dad did say to us, and now the dad said this to Ken Silva, the reporter, when he called him. The dad was, like I said, he should not have been talking to us. He should have been talking to his lawyer, because he was intoxicated, and he kept interchanging. He kept saying suicide and then overdose. And then one time he slipped and said murder. We were like, hold on, did you say murder? Like, why'd you say that? Oh, that's not what I meant. We're like, this man should have stopped. Okay. Because like at one point he was like, no, he didn't have anything to do with his mother's murder. And we're like,
Wow. Yeah.
what? Excuse me, but he also said, we asked him. So when you're listening to the conversation, Ken is like being real kind of slow, kind of let him talk. And he goes, hey man, like, well, how did she die? And it's like, oh, well, she took her own life, sadly. And also, heroin, because you never know when fentanyl is going to be somewhere today. It's probably fentanyl. We're like, so did she kill herself or was it a fentanyl overdose? Right.
Mm.
So again, he'd already kind of been putting out some weird narrative. And then Ken goes, what about the blood? Let's be real. There was a lot of blood there. And the guy at first tries to be like, oh, no, that was actually fake pictures from a different scene from when his stepdad killed himself. And no, there was no blood. He was just conflating the two pictures and to get people for attention. And Ken's like, sir, we saw the video. Like there's a video, And then he switches again and goes, oh, she had liver cirrhosis and she vomited blood.
Yeah, just all over the
So
place. All over the
it was like
place.
really strange. And like, I would be under at that time, I'm like, oh yeah, this woman was murdered. But then the police came out and said there was no foul play suspected. So who knows? Maybe she had like a ruptured esophageal varices or something that's rare, but could have
Weird
happened, I
timing.
guess.
Pretty weird timing.
Pretty weird, yeah.
Mm.
I don't know if we'll ever know. It might have been a cover up. Who knows? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, definitely a weird scene though. It didn't look like someone who had vomited blood.
Yeah.
Not to get too graphic, but I've seen some of those images of people like who have like a ruptured blood vessel and just vomit blood, and you can die very fast from that. But usually those scenes look like something out of like a haunted house that you would see in like a butcher's, like with the wall, like everywhere. And this was very much concentrated on the bed in the form of a body that looked like she'd been stabbed and bled in a puddle. It didn't look like it something don't add up.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I guess we'll have to just I don't know, wait and see what else
You
comes
never
out.
know.
I'll be watching your Twitter account avidly and looking forward to any more kind of revelations that come out of this. But Becca, so awesome to talk with you and so fascinating. I don't know, the rabbit holes you go down and share are
This
truly
one has been
fascinating. And
so crazy.
but yeah,
Yeah.
also really kind of, I don't know, there's a lot to think about. There's a yeah, there's it goes deep. There's a lot of, I don't know, it can be worldview changing if any of these claims are real. And like I said at the start, the difference between you and many people that make these kind of claims is yours as far as I'm able to see, which yep, you come with receipts, your research is thorough. Um, behind off air, some of the chats we've had and some of the things you've shown me have been pretty bizarre, pretty bizarre. But anyway, it's you know, good on you for doing the work you do, and thanks so much for coming on and sharing it all with me.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And maybe next time there'll be something even crazier. I don't know
I'm
how
sure
it
there
keeps getting
will.
crazier, but
I'm sure there will. How do people follow along for the journey and see the stuff you're putting out?
so lately I've been doing most of my breaking stuff on Twitter. I wish that I could make more videos because I do love to do it, but man, it's just so time consuming and I just don't have time between I do have a day job. So
Mm.
like, I think on Twitter it's bx_on_x. You could follow the breaking stuff there. On Rumble, it's bx on Rumble, just no space, just bx on Rumble. And there's the video I told you about, the video about Jade Parker and the Accelerationists. I would really suggest everybody go see that video. It's honestly, it's on kind of like a primer to everything else, right? Once you kind of see that video and understand where these kind of perspectives are coming from, I think it's a real eye-opener and life-changing for people to kind of start seeing, like, I've had a lot of people message me and go like, oh my God, like I watched this video and suddenly everything made sense to me because I'd had this like feeling in the back of my mind that something was not right with like the narratives, the mass shootings and stuff, and like this put it all together. So I've got a lot of feedback like that from people who are just very excited to tell me that like my video changed something in them. So I'm happy that that's, having that kind of effect. So go watch that at BX on Rumble. I think it's my most recent video. It's about 20 minutes, but it's well worth the time to kind of get a feel for what this whole mess is.
Yeah, awesome. I'll definitely check it out. Well, thanks again. And thank you everyone for listening and have a great day. See you later.